Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with Len Cabaltera, a longtime bike racer and longtime member of the Velodrome Board. Thank you for talking with me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
When did you begin racing?
I actually started in the stock bike program back in 1985.
And what prompted you to go into bike racing?
Well, I was a runner in high school and college up at UW Parkside, and one of the things I did in the summer was a little bit of cross training, and my brother and I were riding around from Beach Park, Illinois, and we came up to Kenosha and found this track, discovered the track. And we did a few laps there, and then I go, wow, this is kind of neat. So I got a little bit more information, and the next summer I actually signed up for the Monday Stock Bike, where beginners can start.
And what year was that?
It was 1985.
Okay. And tell me about the stock racing program.
The Stock Bike program is a developmental program at the Velodrome. It's on Monday nights, been historically on Monday nights. It's from riders of 3 years old all the way up to whoever wants to race. Open, you can race whatever bike you have. We supply helmets typically at the Velodrome for the last few years, but a bike and a helmet is all you need.
Okay. And how long did you participate in that program?
I participated in the stock bike program for 2 years, and one of the nice things for me, being a broke college student, was at the end of the year in stock bike there was a major awards being given out, and I had won the Schwinn Paramount. You know, Schwinn was based in Waterford, and Waterford, Wisconsin, part of the great Schwinn cycling organization, and the winner of stock bike received a free track bike to use. And without that, I wouldn't have continued racing because, again, being in college, you can't go into the next step without, fancy equipment.
Then what is the next step?
After stock bike, you can go into licensed racing. You know, there's a few organizations, the main one being USA Cycling, and that is the organization where the Olympic team and national teams are chosen. Their racing ages start there at 9, and then they have masters categories all the way up to 70, 80, and plus years old.
Okay, so how many categories are there in the track bike circuit?
Typically, there are 5 adult categories. A Cat 5 is your beginning category, where you're just a novice. You come in, you gain points and experience, and you move up to Category 4. Category 4, and then you gain points there. And then Category 3, which is most your average racers are. And some are vying to move up to Category 1, 2, where you become, if you go to nationals or you're winning a lot of races, and from that you can move on to the national team or national championships. But it's basically the top levels, and we have all there.
Okay. And how long have you participated in the track bike program?
I actually started racing in 1987. After I won the Paramount, I rode for the Kenosha Wheelmen and spent a few years there, and been racing every year except for, unfortunately, the COVID years, which shut it down, but I've done something every year since then, even this year.
Okay. Tell me about some of the races that are involved or available in the track bike.
There are a few races. Some are more for short sprinters, and then there's some endurance type races. The simplest race out there is called the scratch race, and that is you go around and you start the race, you go around for a few laps. A designated set of laps could be 3 laps, 5 laps, 10 laps, up to 50 laps and more, and they ring the bell, and the first one who crosses the line is the winner. Simple. And they have variations of that. And one is called the points race. That is the race where instead of ringing the bell at the end of the race, there's like intermittent finishes throughout the race. So you go 5 or 10 laps, the bell rings, and you get points. 5, 3, 2, and 1 points. And then at the end of the race, whoever has the most points wins. And that could be from 15 laps to we have the Bob Farr Memorial Race, which is 150 laps.
That's a long time.
That is one of the longest track races in the country.
And are there other categories as well?
We do match sprints, which is the ones most people see on TV. It's a 3-lap scratch where 2 riders play cat and mouse, and it's basically one hard sprint to the finish line. Another variation of that is called a Kieran racing, where you ride behind a motorcycle. 6 riders or 8 riders start, and the motorcycle paces you for until there's about 2 laps, 1.5 to 2 laps to go, pulls off, and then the race starts. That's a very interesting one, and that's actually what keeps me racing, because I have a lot of fun in those. And then another one is the Madison. And that's very interesting. If you're a new spectator, it can be very confusing. That's where 2 riders are teamed up, but only one rider races at a time. So the rider is racing in the field, and then another rider is resting at the top of the track. As he comes around, they go side by side. They either draw even, or they're called hand slings, throw the other rider into the race. Then the rider goes up and rests around the track till the rider comes through again. Very confusing, very hectic, but very fun to watch.
Okay. And can you tell me about the history of the Velodrome?
The Velodrome started in 1927. So we are at the Kenosha Velodrome, the longest operating velodrome in the country. Outside of, again, the World War II, COVID years, and our track being refurbished a few years back, that we've continually run a program. Throughout the years, there's been improvements of the years. It was a cinder track, actually a clay track, then it was an asphalt track, and in 2017, the city of Kenosha helped us rebuild the track to a concrete structure which would last for 40, 50 years.
Okay. How many velodromes are operating in the United States today?
There's about 24 in the country, so we are very lucky to have one in our backyard. Think about in all the country, there's only 24 velodromes. We have one here. The next closest would be Northbrook, Illinois, where we share a lot of riders and a lot of camaraderie between the 2 locations. The next closest would be Indianapolis, and in all over the country. I can throw them out. Like Pennsylvania, Fort Lauderdale, Cleveland, Colorado Springs, Houston, Baton Rouge, Redmond. The most, I won't say the most popular one right now, but it's where all the nationals are being held, or many of the national championships, is an indoor velodrome in Carson, California.
Okay. And have the nationals been held in Kenosha before?
Yeah, we've held a few national championships over the years. Looking back, there were 8, I'd say, elite national championships, starting in 1928. Throughout the years, and just going from what I've known, 78, 82, and more recently, in 1996, if 1996 is recent, 1996 we held the Junior National Championships in Kenosha, and then in 2003 we held the U.S. Masters National Championships.
Okay. And where do the riders come from? The racers that are racing today at the Velodrome?
A lot of riders come from, I'd say, the area from Madison, Milwaukee, Chicago. That's where the bulk of our riders come. We get visitors up from Indianapolis, I'd say in Minnesota, and if there's a major cycling event in, say, Chicago or Milwaukee area, we'll get visitors from around the country, like some of the major road events. They'll come join us.
Okay, and what are the ages of most of these bike track racers today?
The ranges of the athletes in the Kenosha system. We've Kenosha Velodrome program. We offer racing from starting at 9-10. We have a junior program of 15 to 18, all the way up to 50 plus categories. The bulk of the racers over the last few years have been in our junior category, and that is great because that's the building blocks for our future development. But then there's the key group, which are some of the, I'd say, early 20s to 30s, collegiate athletes or athletes that are looking to, go further than beyond just racing in our local scene to, go to national championships and develop into, the next possibly Olympians.
Okay. And when was the heyday of bike racing, or is today the heyday?
I'll tell you, being around since '85, so a long time, I've seen a lot of ebbs and flows of the cycling. There are some years when the turnout is great, some years when it is down, and it's just an ebb and flow. I started, when I'd say the '80s were pretty strong. We've had, I think each decade has a few strong years, and it just depends on what people are doing, or our new riders coming up. So I'd say no, we're not in the heyday anymore, but we're looking forward to with the amount of juniors coming up in the program that we have in the junior program, and the amount of riders in the stock bike program. We're looking forward to just continue building that.
Well, where do you find the racers from? What are you mentioned the Monday night stock?
Yes.
And a very number of ages. How many people are involved in that seating program?
That development program, it's been pretty strong again. Since I started, it was a really big operation, not operation, but a large amount of riders. This year, in the 2023 season, we had 163 unique riders show up. And that could be from any age. It's, a 3-year-old on a big wheel or a kid on a tricycle to a 10-year-old to 14-year-old on a BMX style bike to adults on your standard road style bike.
How did bike racing get to be popular? When was it popular? How did it develop as a sport?
In the late 1890s and the early 1900s, bicycle racing was one of the most lucrative professional sports there was. That's probably the development. So outside of the Kenosha Velodrome, there was velodromes in Brown Deer, Wisconsin. They had a lot in Chicago, downtown Chicago, where it was just the sport that brought a lot of people into it. So that was the heyday of, I won't say heyday, but we mentioned heyday, but I think that, it was a professional sport that many people came to.
Okay. And today, there's a lot of people still involved in the sport. As you mentioned, 163 unique riders. As they go up into the track program, you still see a large number of people racing? Is there something that makes it more difficult for people to continue racing? Distractions, competition perhaps?
I think, of course, the competition isn't other bike races or other tracks, local tracks. It's other things that people do these days. Kids on their video games or youth soccer, or not even. And for most juniors going into, so you finish high school, you go into college. That is a hurdle. We try to figure out ways to capture those, and some good ways that helps that is. Many colleges have actual collegiate cycling, and that has been a good stepping stone for a lot of the riders, especially from Kenosha, in the development program to the standard Tuesday night, and then out of high school, they've continued racing collegiately.
Are there former Kenosha racers who are racing collegiately?
Right now, there's a few that go down to Marion College in Indiana, outside of Indianapolis. Started in the junior development program. Carter Kasanovich is one, Mia Scarlato, Lucy Foss are ones racing right now, started in our program. So not only have it started in collegiate, but this has been a start of the stock bike program has been the start of many cycling careers.
Earlier, you mentioned the fact that you winning the Schwinn Paramount and were given a track bike for the following year.
Yes.
What is a track bike? How is that different from bikes that people are used to seeing riding on the street?
Track bikes, they're, everyone's used to like the 10-speed style bike. So it's the same 700 centimeter, 27-inch wheels. The difference of a track bike, it's a direct drive. There are no brakes, and there's one gear. And if you pedal forward, you move forward. And since there's no brakes, you can kind of back pressure to stop the bike from going forward or quit pedaling. But you're not coasting, it's fixed. It's called a fixed gear bike.
So as it goes forward, it will also go backward the same way?
Yeah, it's harder to ride it backwards, but you kind of stop pedaling or back pressure to stop, so you don't really ride backwards. But if you have to remember to continue pedaling, and I think for a lot of riders, the first times they really race, and if you're on a road bike and you finish the race, you coast. And a track bike, when you finish the race, you have to remember to keep pedaling. Even though your legs are tired, to keep pedaling, or you get bucked off, not bucked off, but you'll hop the rear wheel.
Other than track racing, are there other types of bike racing as well?
Yes, in some of the big bicycle events, is mountain biking is a big cycling event that's starting, or type of cycling that's taken over a lot. In the high school arena. It's called the NICA, which is the High School Mountain Bike League. So instead of playing football or running track, athletes are actually riding mountain bikes representing their high schools. There's also BMX racing, gravel racing, where you're riding just a bike on gravel fire roads, cyclocross racing, BMX racing, downhill racing. So there are a couple of types of bike racing out there.
What about road racing? The Tour de France, that's a big bike event over many, many miles.
Yes.
Okay, so what kind of racing is that considered?
That's considered road racing, but within that road racing, there's time trials also. So we have, in the road racing, that's where your bikes have multiple gears, you have brakes, so you're riding up to 120, 140 miles a day over 21 days in France. There is a local series in Wisconsin called Tour of America's Dairyland, which offers 11 days, not quite 140 miles a day, but for all categories from juniors to masters. And professionals actually come in for that. It was 11 days, and races are maybe up to about an hour and a half. So not, the 140s.
Okay. Is that similar to what Kenosha had experienced with its Food, Folks, and Spokes series that would come in the summer for some time?
Yes, that was the offshoot of that. For many years, Super Week was I think it was 20 days of racing that coincided with the Tour de France. Great event, multiple races. Food, Folks, and Spokes. I've had the pleasure of racing multiple times in that one, and racers from all over the country. That was for many years that was the highlight. In '96 when the Atlanta Games or the Olympic Games were in Atlanta, Lance Armstrong showed up at Super Week and raced in the Kenosha race. We've had a lot of top professional riders that you would race in the Tour de France that actually raced in Super Week maybe the years before or after. And many of, I'd say, Olympians and national champions around the country in the U.S. were all raced in Super Week and still come back for the Tour of America's Dairyland.
So how successful have bike racers from Kenosha been moving forward from a Tuesday night race?
There's been a handful, and I'll just say when I started racing and I was part of the Kenosha Wheelmen, Bob Farr, a great person, and he was on the 1960 Olympic team and was a national champ. Another one, a former Kenosha Wheelman that was actually one of my first coaches, was Hans Nurnberg, a national champ in 1971. a lot of another top level athlete was Rick Dregney, another part of the Kenosha Wheelmen. I'm naming people when I started, so I remember them,
Yeah.
But, Rick was at the national level for a lot of years, mentored a lot of athletes just like Hans and Bob did coming up through. So, there's them. More recently, there was Paul Swift, who is a Kenosha homegrown athlete, was a national champion, went to world championships. Robbie Ventura, who started his racing as a young junior and possibly even in the stock bike, raced all the way up. He was a professional racer, and he ended up, ended up's not the right word, but he ended up riding for the U.S. Postal Team, which is the team of Lance Armstrong. So from Kenosha, that's great to have that. But if you expand into the Milwaukee area, Kenosha Velodrome has been a home track for, I'd say, for people in Milwaukee. We've had a rider, back in the day, it was Les Barczewski, multinational champ, went to world championships, and was just inducted into the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame this year. And then one that we can't forget, I think one of the few Olympians was Erin Veenstra from Racine, Wisconsin. She raced actually with the Kenosha Velosport cycling team early on, and she was a national champ, and she also rode in I believe it was the 2000 Olympics, where she was fourth place. So as far as great cyclists out there, a lot of great national champions in the juniors arena, but from the senior, the ones that carried it over, I'd say, that I remember, Paul, Robbie, and Aaron have been the top and pinnacle for sure.
Okay, and you mentioned you have these unique riders, and where do they come from? I mean, you don't go advertising for people. You don't have coaches running around looking for, bike racers. How do they get into the sport?
I would say, the stock bike is one program, and we've talked about that. Another one is speed skating. Back, when I looked at some of the history of people who've raced in Kenosha, speed skating is a winter sport, especially when the rink was outdoors in West Allis. And in the summer, many of them race and still race bicycles. So it was a carryover. So you can get riders coming up, or somebody who always knew somebody. And when I started racing, everyone, I won't say everyone, but a lot of people were friends of this guy who raced back then, or my father raced, or my uncle raced. So this was a sort of building on the family atmosphere. I've had, people I've raced against, and now I race against their kids, right? So it's building on that. So it's the family of the family feeling of the homeliness of the velodrome. So you try to keep bringing people in.
Okay, in terms of family, do you know of any families where bike racing had become something very important in their lives? Maybe generational, or maybe sisters, or anything like that.
I'm going to mention one who, the Joe Worry, and he's a great supporter of the Velodrome, has been for many years. Of course, I did not race with him. I raced against his sons, and now this year, the last 2 years, his grandsons have been coming down to the track. The neat part of the generations. And again, another one would be like Rick Dregney and Nicholas Dregney, who raced with Rick, raced with against Nick. So there's a lot of that. The building of the family.
Okay. Have there been, like I just mentioned, sisters? Do you know of any sisters who are equally successful in racing? I mean, we didn't talk about girls in cycling.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, say women in cycling were some of our best. Outside of Robbie and Paul, some of the greatest successes have been in the women's cycling out of the Kenosha Velodrome Development Program. I'll talk about two current great road and crit racers who started in our stock bike program on the Monday night. It's Samantha Schneider and Skylar Schneider. They won. They were just the winners of the National Criterium Series, and Skylar is the Pan American Road Race champion, and she raced in the World Championships this year. Another one. Speaking of women, again with Erin, who also there's a Tiffany Galaki and Sarah Sorensen who won national championships riding for Kenosha Velosport. But also another one that came to mind is Katie Antono. I raced against her father. They're from Racine, and she came up through the stock bike program, and she turned into a top 10 world-ranked cyclocross racer. Raced it collegiately, and then continued on as a professional for many years.
And you mentioned family again as an important part of bike racing. When, let's say, racers either decided no longer to race, or parents supported their children when they raced and then their children no longer race, you find that the parents continue to be out there supporting racing even though they no longer have anybody in the game, so to speak?
Yes, who's coming to watch. Yes, there's the parents of the riders, that are up on the hill watching. Many of them are fans, and the fans, when I look through there, are people who used to race on their Tuesday night, filling the hill and the stands. People who are part of the local bicycle clubs that are maybe raced in the 80s and 90s and are still riding, and that group comes down and watches racing. So I think that's where we're getting the fans from. It's parents of the kids, spouses, and old racers who want to stay connected.
Yeah. We didn't mention anything about weather. Has weather been a problem for the Kenosha Velodrome during the season that it has?
Oh, this year was the first year we ever canceled racing because of smoke, right? Because of the forest fires. But you don't race in the rain, and so that's the beauty of racing the track is if it's wet and cold, or I wouldn't say cold, if it's wet and rainy, we don't race on the track. The smoke again was a health hazard, so where a lot of things in Wisconsin shut down. But other than that, temperature doesn't scare us. You can dress for the weather. We raced when it was 110. I think it was last year when we had some high temperatures. Wet and smoky, we don't race in.
Okay, and how has technology affected bike racing?
Well, a lot. The original track bikes, and for many years it was a steel frame with alloy wheels and sew-up tires. And over the last few years, there were carbon wheels, carbon solid disc wheels, carbon front wheels, and carbon frames. Aerodynamics come into a play in frame and wheels. So technology has changed.
How about in terms of training?
Training has become very specific. Back when I started, as part of the wheelman, we had a weight training program in the winter, and we didn't really ride a bike until March. Now you have to be riding year round. Maybe not all efforts, but it's physical, staying in shape. But there's the equipment as part of technology, so the technology also helps you at training. You have cranks and you have wheels that will just measure your output, so you can just train specifically for your event. And it's called wattage. It's the power output, how much power you put on the pedals. You can measure that instantaneously now, and you can have a coach scientifically build a program based on your output, your calories output for a specific race.
Okay. And how long have you been a member of the board?
I actually started, so I started racing in '85, USA Cycling in '87. Part of the board began, I was looking back, as 1989. All except for about 2 years I've not been part of the board. And as a member at large, I was actually race director, been president, so all parts of the board.
Okay. And I imagine it takes some amount of money to produce these races on a weekly basis. Where does the budget come from?
Well, things that have to things that have to come out of the to help support the races. There's officials. We have the Scout Leaders ambulance down there every week. Prize money for the racers. So we have a program that takes a certain amount of money. So as part of our developing that, we ask for sponsors. And if you go down to the track any Tuesday, or almost any time, we keep them up year round now, there's banners around the track. And those banners are sponsors for the cycling, and for the track and for the Monday and Tuesday night events. And that's where we raise the money to keep the program going.
Do the bike racers, do they pay a fee to race?
Yes, there's
or
a fee.
Membership?
Yeah, there's a membership to join the Kenosha Velodrome Racing Association, and what that does is just that's gives you a say in the development of the programs. You're part of the board, and also as a racer, there's an entry fee. Just like if you pay a race, if you're going to run a running race, you pay a fee to help cover the costs.
Okay, and you mentioned that there is prize money. Would you say there's money in it for the racers?
If you're a junior parent, or if you're a junior and your parent still pays for everything, yeah, you get some pocket money each week. With the cost of racing, I believe it's $10 for a junior, $20 for a senior, $25 for a senior and masters to race both categories. And if you win $15 or $20, as a normal weekly race, you're not going to make a living. But some larger events like the Bob Farr Memorial and the Mayor's Cup and the Bill Schulte Trophy race, there's larger prize money. And no, you're not going to get rich, but it helps pay for the tank of gas, stopping at Big Star after the races. So.
Okay. So what do you think the future is of bike track racing in Kenosha?
I think the greatest thing is we have a facility that is going to be around for a long time. Again, with the City of Kenosha and City of Kenosha Parks Department, investing in I'd say the crown jewel of Kenosha, the Velodrome, because there's 24 in the country. And, we want to keep that program going. And we have an organization of passionate people on the board and as supporters, and a development stock bike program that keeps riders coming through. I'd see it keep on for many years.
Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you.